Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2454. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm in Berkeley, California, with a very special guest by the name of Russ Mitchell. Russ, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have it in gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
Yeah, I'm ready, and I like that old-fashioned transmission.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun. I raised both my kids and taught them when they learned to drive in a stick-shift car. And I think in high school, they were the only kids in their whole school that knew how to do that. So, I figure it's a good theft deterrent because somebody will get in your car and, can't drive this one. I'll go to the next one. So.
Right.
But it's a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging. I always ask my guests this question, Russ, before I introduce you and we dive into your world. What's one little thing that maybe people don't know about you?
Well, you kind of gave it away, but that's okay. Because I work at the LA Times and I've been here for about 10 years, people just assume that I work at, or I live in Los Angeles.
Right.
But actually, I've been in Berkeley for about 20 years, in the Bay Area for about 30.
Oh, wow.
Most of my sources don't know that. Of course, everybody that's a friend or family does, but not the sources I deal with.
Yeah. Well, now the whole world knows, so sorry.
Right.
But that's okay. That's okay. My son and his wife lived up in San Francisco for about 5 years. After college, they got jobs at a couple little tech companies up there, Google and Facebook. I think you may have heard of them.
I've heard of those.
Yeah, I think they've been around for a little bit. And they lived there for a while, but now they've moved up here close to us, which is wonderful for us to have our kids nearby. So that is very good, dealing with the rain a little bit, but that's okay. Makes the trees grow tall and get real green. Let me introduce you. Russ Mitchell is a staff writer at the Los Angeles Times. As he said, he covers the epic transition to electric vehicles and energy storage for the Los Angeles Times, blending technology, policy, and consumerism with a particular focus on the state of California. He's worked on staff at publications including Businessweek, Wired, and Condé Nast Portfolio. Russ is a graduate of the University of Illinois. He also studied at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology as a Vannevar Bush Fellow. We'll be back in just a moment, but first, a word from our sponsors, so give them a little love. Buckle up, and we'll be right back. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. Are you ready to take charge of your financial future? Then let me introduce you to Capitalize Your Finances. It's an online course designed to empower you with the knowledge and tools for mastering your money. This course will help you lay out the ins and outs of budgeting, the importance of emergency funds, investing strategies, and how to plan for a secure retirement. All this presented by financial planner Chris Paniotu. Chris has developed this course to help you effectively navigate your world of finance with confidence. Stop stressing about money and start taking control. Enroll in Capitalize Your Finance online course today and pave your way to financial success. To learn more, go to capitalizepodcast.com/courses, or better yet, go to the Cars Yeah website, show notes page for today's show, and click on the link under Capitalize Your Finances. You'll be glad you did. Do it today. So, Russ, I want to go back in time a little bit before we talk about what you're doing today, how you got into the business of writing and some of your passion for cars, because you tend to have a focus on that. How did this all begin? Can you take us back in time a little bit?
Well, the writing and the cars are two different things, although they happen around the same time. When I was in 8th grade, I had a little publication that I'm old enough to have run it off on a mimeograph.
Oh, yeah.
And it was kind of a boring little newspaper about school news. But one day there was a fight in the lunchroom between Kirk Tuttle and Dan Maher.
Oh, my gosh.
And I did a special edition. I had them sliding across the lunch table, smashing Suzy Q's in each other's face. Claudette Guzan's purse fell off. I regret doing this, but I was only an 8th grader. I wrote about how out of her purse rolled a brassiere, and out of the brassiere rolled 2 rolled up Kleenex. And yeah, I talked to her later. She claims just a few years ago, she claims not to remember that. So,
well, of course not.
Either
not
it wasn't a big deal, or
experience like that. Oh my God.
And the principal confiscated the papers. I raised the price, was selling them on the playground, and he confiscated the papers. And I argued with him about the First Amendment, and he sent me home. So I had to return with my parents. So that was my early journalism experience. And I grew up, I'm 69 years old and grew up in the 60s, and lots of interest in cars. I grew up outside of Chicago, and all my friends had not necessarily expensive cars, but interesting cars. Our little group was mostly interested in little British cars like MGs and Triumphs, et cetera. Yeah. But we also had the gearheads that had their Pontiac GTOs, and was often working those in the garage. So I had a taste for cars from the early days. And eventually at Business Week, I covered the auto industry in Detroit for several years. So that's where I got my professional chops.
Well, as you know, and we're of the same generation, my kids call me the boomer guy. So I get blamed for that. Hey, Dad, you're acting a lot like a boomer. I go, well, I am. So I'm just acting my age. I think that's right. Appropriate. But well, let's get into what you're reporting on and doing there at the LA Times today in the car world, because as part of an introduction here, we talked about EVs and how that is affecting everything. I mean, this entire EV phenomenon is coming so fast and so furious. So talk a bit about what you write about these days, your focus on the automotive world, and we'll see where we go from here.
Sure. Recently, I was at the business section and covered EVs from a business standpoint, and also covered autonomous driving. But recently moved to the climate section, and I'm doing a little bit more about policy around electric vehicles, looking at forecasts and whether they're going to make it or not. But in addition, I do some fun consumer reporting too, and drive EVs around and do reviews on those. Right now, I'm working on a story about public charging and how awful it is, and whether it's getting in the way of EV adoption, and what can be done about it. And I'm also working on a story currently about gas taxes, and how gas taxes are going to be reduced as EVs grow. And if they grow to the extent that California wants them to, there's going to be some serious budget problems. And the legislature is going to have to decide whether to raise taxes or fix the roads, which already are pretty terrible in California. So there's lots of policy angles around the EV space that I'll be doing over the next year or so.
Oh my, well, you're touching on some very hot topics here. When you think about, let's start with, well, where do we start with this? Because there's so many ways we can go with this one. One is taxes. And I left California 30 years ago. We left our business because it just wasn't business friendly. And that was 30 years ago because of the cost of running things. And if you look at, I think for a long time, you guys there in California have the highest gas prices in the country. Now, we up here in Washington State are very close second, or maybe we're a little ahead of you, I don't know, due to the high taxes put on gasoline here. It's an interesting thing you said, though, as far as how it will affect budgets, because I know California is running a pretty heavy-duty deficit right now overall. And without getting into all the politics of it, I'm more interested in your perception, since you're in this, of EVs and that effect, because I've never thought of it that way, that EVs are going to affect a reduction in gas usage, therefore taxes. I kind of akin to, they started heavily taxing cigarettes in hopes that would drive people from smoking, and then all of a sudden they went, oh, we're not collecting taxes on this anymore. Uh-oh. Right. That didn't. So is this a combination of just politicians not thinking far enough ahead, or where do we take this one topic, and then we'll get into EVs more? Sure. Yeah, the answer to that is yes. They haven't been thinking far enough ahead. Of course, it's uncertain how this is all going to shape out. The state intends, it's requiring automakers to sell only
electric vehicles by 2035, but they're not requiring consumers to buy them. So we'll have to see what the uptake is on the consumer end and whether the state has to change its mandate on the automakers. But that's causing a lot of headaches. I want to put on a side note that I'm very much in favor of electric vehicles. I have one. I like them. I think they're better for the environment, but the switchover comes with lots of problems that have to be contended with, and one of those is how to pay for our already lousy roads in California.
Yeah.
They're going to be billions of dollars short if EVs take off the way the state wants them to. And there's a recent report from the Legislative Analyst's Office that says basically you're either going to have to raise taxes somewhere else or find the funds somewhere else, or you're going to have to cut back on maintenance and construction. And none of those are politically palatable. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. EVs are interesting to me, and my listeners know this. I don't have an EV, but then I don't really drive much anymore. I don't have to commute anymore. I work from home. My wife's retired. So we really don't drive our cars that much. And when we do go on trips, we fly there because we have family in different parts of the country. So road trips don't really affect us. But I was in California for the car week, and I had my first experience in a Tesla. I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was really interesting. But that one factor you just touched on, the anxiety that I've got to find a place to charge this thing.
Right.
Where am I going to do it? How long is it going to take? And my first experience wasn't very good because I parked in underground parking thinking, I'll plug in. There's a plug-in. I'll go up and eat lunch. And I'm up there eating lunch with some friends. I come down after 2 hours and the car's only charged up another like 7%. So I learned the lesson about the big power chargers, the fast chargers. And I'm like, this doesn't work and so forth. So in your mind, when you being an electric vehicle person yourself, what do you see has to happen not only in California, but across the country? And is it even doable in the next, you talk about 2035. I don't know how the car makers in California are going to make any money. That's not very far away.
It's not very far away.
Yeah. So what's your crystal ball look like, Russ? Because I'm real interested.
Well, I try to avoid the crystal ball and don't like to forecast because when I did that in the past, I'm often wrong. And I notice that most people that forecast such things are often wrong.
Yep.
If not always wrong.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an incredible challenge to get up to that goal, particularly when you've got a public charging system that really doesn't work. The advocates of EVs say we need to get it to the point where it's just as easy as pumping gas. Well, the fact is it never will be. If you have a home charger, and which I do, and you charge overnight, then it really is a lot more convenient. You don't have to stop at the gas station at all. But if you're on a road trip, you do, and they're hard to find often. They often don't work. And it takes, as you notice, depending on the power of the charger and how well your electric vehicle can accept a certain level of power, it's going to take you, at least 30 minutes, if not an hour or more, to fully charge your car or get it up to 80%. So, and I don't see that. It'll get faster over time. There's details you can get into about 400 volt and 800 volt, but I won't bore people with the details right now. It'll get faster, but it's not going to be as fast as pumping at the gas station. It's just not going to be. So we'll see, what effect that has as the early adopters who have already bought their EVs move into the more mainstream, and how willing people are to put up with that. There are good reasons to put up with it, but we'll see, whether people do.
Well, absolutely. Now, I did rent a Tesla again when I went to visit my grandchildren in Arizona. That experience was better because the hotel that I stayed at had 3 chargers. And I went, okay. So one night I went to park and they were all filled. And so the car had to sit. The next day I started to get a little more nervous. Next night they're all filled. The third night there was one open. So I could park the car there and it did charge overnight. And I kind of wiped my brow and went, okay, I'm okay. But still, it's that, I call it the tether. that makes us all a little bit nervous. So in some respects, it works. I've had a lot of battery and electric manufacturers on the show. And obviously one thing that they're working towards is a fast charge where you could actually charge a car in 3 to 5 minutes, fully charge a car. But the technology's still not here. I don't know when it's going to be here. It could take a while. And all the folks that have the current battery technology, may not work in their vehicles. So yeah, there's a lot of hurdles to go over. So my guess is that mandates like 2035 will probably be pushed because the manufacturers they can't get the technology going that fast. There's a lot to do here. So I guess we'll kind of see where it goes. What kind of electric car do you have, may I ask?
Well, we have my family has 2 cars. The main car is we have a Lexus hybrid SUV, and the other car is just a little BMW i3S.
Oh yeah,
which is a wonderful little car. It only has a 120-mile range, but that's perfectly fine for around town and short trips. And we use that car more than the other car. So, I would, when people ask me about whether they should buy an EV, I tell them that, if it's your only car, I'd definitely think twice about it. If you're going to use it as an around town car in an occasional longer trip and are willing to put up with the public charging system for those longer trips, I think it's almost a no-brainer because they're fun to drive and there's less maintenance. And if you have a home charger, you can keep it, up to your mileage level and do fine.
Yeah, I think it's very circumstantial. I know for my wife and I, we'd be perfect candidates because, again, we just don't drive that much. And so my repair guy is calling me, Mark, how come I haven't seen you? And I go, I put like 800 miles on my car in the last 12 months.
Wow.
And my wife's car, really not that much more. We just drive around locally here and a couple times up to town, and that's about it. So we're great candidates for it. But yeah, I think we've got some ways to go here.
Well, let me say too, as long as you like your car, there's no reason to change. You're not really polluting very much because you don't use it that much. Yeah. And if anybody who buys a new EV has to contend with the idea that their old EV or their old gas car, unless it's on its last legs, is going to be used by somebody else. So you've got those greenhouse gases plus the greenhouse gases that go into manufacturing that new car. So for most people, if they hung on to their existing gas car until it was ready for the junkyard, would be a more greenhouse gas friendly way to go than buying a new electric car.
So since you're real deep in this, you've touched on something I want to ask you about, and that is greenhouse gases and what it takes to drive cars, produce cars. One of the counters to electric vehicles is what it takes to produce those batteries. And so I have not investigated enough to know a lot about this. I'm hoping that you have. How does that relate? So when people argue, yeah, but look what it takes, how this has to be mined and so forth, where's the power coming from to power the vehicles? Is it still coming from the same source? Is it more? Have you done studies or done reports on how do you balance this out? Is there a balance to it?
Yeah, I've read a lot. There are a lot of reports out there, and I've read a whole bunch of them. Mm-hmm. If your utility is powered by coal, you're not going to do that much good with an electric car. Mm-hmm. In California, there's very little coal in the system, so it's a pretty relatively clean way to go. But there's no such thing as totally clean energy, and there's certainly no such thing as a totally clean car. There's minerals that need to be mined, sometimes in countries that aren't that really take advantage of super poor people in miserable working conditions. There's the mining consumes greenhouse gases. The construction of the car consumes them. Still, the reports I've seen that when you compare. If you're powering up with relatively clean energy, even when you take all that into account, that electric car is going to be using a lot less or putting out a lot less greenhouse gases than a gasoline car will.
Is there anything that you've learned about long-term I shouldn't say efficiency. Let me put it this way. We tend to buy cars in our family new and keep them for a long time. My wife's car is 20 years old. My car is 19 years old. Yeah. I take impeccable care of my cars. So if you looked at them, you'd never believe they're as old as they are. But that's just me. I'm kind of a nutcase when it comes to that. But one of the things I've heard from other people is that if you bought an electric car, that there's no way, even with the same mileage. Now my car has 61,000 miles. My wife has 155,000. That a battery car would last that long because you'd have to replace battery packs, which expensive from what I've heard. So have you learned in your writing and learning that there's anything to that notion? Because if I say bought a new EV tomorrow, would I still have the same car if I drove it 150,000 miles 20 years from now? Or would it last that long? Would the batteries last that long?
The answer is that nobody knows yet.
Okay.
The warranties, I can't remember whether it's 8 years, 10 years, and a certain number of miles. And beyond that, nobody's sure. But the reports I've seen on this are that they're lasting a lot longer than people expected they would. So that's a good thing. But really, it's hard to say. There are problems. Tesla has a lot of problems with batteries that need to be replaced due to manufacturing or design defects. But that's a totally different question. The car should last through, certainly the battery should last through the warranty period. And beyond that, everybody is kind of taking their chances. Maybe they'll last a lot longer than people think. And you'll still have that around in 20 years or maybe not.
Yeah. The big question. Well, and a lot of that, if you think about automobiles, we've been fortunate, but we take real good care of our cars. We service them often. And so, the car in the engine in my wife's car is one of those inline 6 BMWs from 2004. And it's just my mechanic saying this car will go 350,000 miles before anything major. You'll have little things that break just from wear and tear, and could be the same for my M3. Maybe not as robust, but again, it's all about how you maintain the car. But you said it, these electric vehicles have a lot less stuff to work on.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
True.
A lot less moving parts and things. So, I guess we'll see. This is also new. It's a learning curve, and I always like to pull the politics out of it as much as you can and just look at the vehicle itself. I like cars that are fun. And I will say that my experience with the Tesla, while I'm not really fond of the looks, that just looks boring to me. I like sports cars.
Right.
But boy, it was fun to drive.
They are fun to drive.
Yeah.
The quality is not the greatest. The looks, I agree, aren't that great, especially in the interior, but they are a lot of fun to drive.
I will say, while I was in California, I met a guy and he let me drive his Porsche Taycan. Now that was nice.
Yes, I've driven that myself.
Yeah, although those vehicles have had some challenges, and I've been hearing things about a lot of repair issues with those vehicles as well. I think we're kind of in a new world here with this stuff. So absolutely, everybody's trying to learn, and that means that some of the horses are going to fall off the carriage, I guess is the way it goes. I always like to talk a bit about both inspiration and challenges. And I'm wondering if you look at your career, or you could apply this to what's happening in the EV market today, what inspires you?
What inspires me? I like to get at the truth of things. And I suppose that's why I went into journalism. I see increasingly as time goes on, I'm seeing a lot more disinformation. There's always been marketing that, in many cases, even if you account for the fact that they're trying to sell you something, bleeds into the misleading. Politicians, of course, like to hide the truth. Increasingly, corporate executives are doing so. I think it's really important to try to reveal the truth as best I can. So in terms of how I came to that, when I started in journalism, I didn't have a personal mentor as such, but there's a reporter named Seymour Hersh who uncovered the My Lai massacre. People our age will remember that. Uncovered Abu Ghraib. And he was not afraid of going up against powerful people. He did a whole book about Henry Kissinger. He's just a dogged reporter. And I took my inspiration from him.
I appreciate what you're saying because, I feel like nothing can be trusted anymore.
Yeah,
and
it's harder and harder.
It's really difficult how to uncover. I always say, we all need to take a grain of salt with everything we read and do our own investigation and learn a little bit more. But it's refreshing to hear that you're saying that. How about challenges? What do you think are and you alluded to one there. Maybe we stay on this topic. One of the biggest challenges these days is misinformation, especially in the media, as we've all started to go, what's real, what's not real? And you add in social media, which just convolutes everything.
Right.
As a challenge, how do we as consumers of journalism overcome that?
Well, this is going to be a little bit self-serving, and people might not agree with me, but I think that trusted brands are really more important than ever. Where no publication is perfect, if you look at publications like our own, the Los Angeles Times or the Washington Post, and for the most part, the New York Times or the Economist or Business Week, those are brands you can trust to do their best to get at the truth and not peddle in disinformation. However, it's becoming increasingly difficult to do that because of the economics. It's really very expensive to finance good reporting. And the economics have changed to the point where philanthropy is necessary at a lot of places, including our own. The LA Times is owned by a biotech billionaire who was kind enough to buy the publication and let us do our job. But that's becoming dicier all the time. So, the challenges are immense. We're also facing artificial intelligence and the idea that even if you have a trusted brand, AI can go in and pull all the information from the trusted brands and then come out with their own version and basically take away the incentive for people to subscribe to those trusted brands because they can get it for free. It's already, happening. It's going to be worsened through AI. So yeah, the challenges are, I'm kind of glad I'm 69 and not 49 or 39 or 29 in this field.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. Sometimes I just don't know. Yeah, it's a challenging world for sure. So many challenges. Well, let's talk about more fun stuff. And I'd love to have you share a story about maybe a special vehicle that's been in your life.
Yeah, the most special vehicle, I bought an Audi TT the first year it came out. And that was it was a 2020 model. And just recently had to get rid of it, but I had it for 23 years.
Oh, wow.
And I actually, it was a rare car because it didn't have a spoiler on the back. If people that pay attention to the old Audi TTs, most of them have a spoiler on the back. That's because in the United States, the regulators made them put one on because it would get kind of squirrely in the back at high speeds. Scott Keogh, who was running Audi at the time, told me that there were only 200 or 300 of those sold in the United States. So, and when I had to get rid of it, I sold it to somebody that's going to turn it into a track car. Just take out all the insides and make it a track car. So it's going to. But I took it down to Death Valley maybe 6 months after I purchased it. I went out in the morning. I went into a valley. The sun was coming up. I could look across this long valley with a 2-lane flat road the whole way. I could see that nobody else was on that highway, so it was only going to threaten my own body.
There you go.
And I got it up as high as I dared, which was about 135.
Ooh, that's
and
fast.
I think that's the fastest I've ever driven a car, including on a track. And but at around 135, I could have gone a little faster, but it did in fact start getting a little jumpy in the back without that spoiler. So I had it turned down. But that was a fun car, a great car. It's a very nicely designed car. I love the exterior design, the interior design. Drove like a dream. Really love that car.
Yeah, Freeman Thomas designed that vehicle. I've got him actually scheduled this month to be a guest here on the show.
Great.
Been trying to get him forever. He's
awesome.
Now playing in the world with Myers Manx. He bought that brand from Bruce Meyer when he passed away.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he's creating electric versions of the Myers Manx, of the old dune buggy kind of idea, as well as ICE engines. And so, yeah, you should check that out. That car was so, I don't know if revolutionary is the right word, but from a design standpoint, it was sure different.
Yeah.
I got to enjoy driving those cars when they first came out on a track. It was at an event. And the thing that I know, and I'm not a tall guy, but you have to be careful. I don't know, I was going to ask you this, hitting your head getting in the car because of the way the roof line dramatic. Every time I got in that car, I hit my head.
Yeah, it took a while. The same for me. It took a while, and then I got used to it. But when passengers got in, I always did the thing the police do is put my hand on
your
top
hand on top of it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, fun car for sure. So and that's interesting. I did not know about that. The spoilers on the back. I will have to pay attention to some more. That was a 2020 model, did you say?
Yeah. You talked about the design. That was one of the very few concept cars that actually ended up in production looking almost exactly like the concept car.
Yeah. I don't know how they pulled that off, but they did. And I did rent an Audi recently. We're kind of thinking maybe of replacing my wife's car sometime in the coming years here. And one of the things I was looking at some Audis. Always liked Audis, although way back in time when Audi wasn't so great, my parents bought you'll remember this, a 100 LS. Remember the Fox car and then the bigger?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that car was just horrible. It was the worst car on the planet. The only thing worse than that car, my dad said, was the Pontiac Lemon, which was a Le Mans that he bought new when I was a little kid. And I think that was built on a Friday during hunting season as well. I think it lasted 6 months and they had to take it back because it was just...
Sounds like 1980s to me.
Well, this was 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, the Pontiac Le Mans. You remember the Tempest, which was a vehicle they were going to get, and then they didn't have the car, so they got a Le Mans. And yeah, Le Mans sounds pretty cool, huh? But it kind of rhymes with lemons. But Audi's come a long way. They're much, much better now. So I'm a bit of a car psychologist, Russ. I'm going to crawl in your head here. If you were reincarnated as a vehicle, now again, this isn't what you want to be. This is how you perceive the man in the mirror. And since you're a writer, I expect some uniqueness here from you. What would you be and why?
Well, I'm going to answer it in two parts. First, I'm going to violate your instruction and talk about the car.
Okay.
I would want to be, and that's any kind of high-end Porsche, whether it's a 911 or even a Panamera or a Macan or a Taycan. Something that's fast, that holds the road, that's great fun to drive. I'd like to think that that's me. But in fact, I think a better illustration might be 1970s clapped out Buick with a super V8 hot rod engine, because I'm still quick, I'm still fast, but how I get there is a little questionable sometimes.
I appreciate your honesty. That's pretty funny. I love it. Well, I'll tell you, I am a Porsche fanatic. Everyone listening to the show regularly knows that. So you had a big smile on my face with the Porsche and the concept.
Well, that M3 is a great car too. I love that.
You know, I've had 4 M3s and they are just incredible. I actually I had a 993 Porsche C4S. It was my daily driver, and I actually sold it, kind of cringe every time I think about this, to buy the new E46 M3 when it came out, because Porsche was just not a very fun commuter car because I was in traffic all the time. And it just didn't even have a cup holder, and it was just, but I love Porsches. I had a wonderful 87 Turbo up until a year ago last summer. I finally sold it. Yeah, they had the car for 14 years. My Orange Crush, I called it. Very rare car.
Wonderful.
In colorways. But I'm going to have another 911 in the garage here soon, I believe. So
cool.
We'll go back to that.
That you're going to drive 800 miles a year?
Geez, you had to say that, Russ, didn't you? Thanks a lot, pal.
Well,
I know.
800 miles, that's for sure.
Well, we could get into my idiosyncrasies, but that would be boring. How about great reading? Since you're a journalist or writer, is there a great book you could share with our listeners today?
Boy, there are so many.
Yes.
Because I decided not to do anything about cars, because probably you've had plenty of people suggest
Just
those.
a few.
There's a recent book. I mentioned Seymour Hersh because I'm a journalist, and if people are interested in journalism and how it works and what a great journalist looks like, Seymour Hersh wrote a book called Reporter, which is wonderfully written. It talks about, he goes through his whole life, but he has had a very colorful life, and talks about his techniques. If you really want to learn about how great reporting is done in a very entertaining way, that's a book to do it. And then a book that I recommend to people, and this is getting into a side of me that we haven't talked about yet, but there's a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi, a Japanese Zen master who came to the U.S. and set up the Zen Center of San Francisco. And it's a wonderful introduction to living in the moment and the power of living in the now and in the present. And I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. Anybody's interested in spiritual matters that don't get too religious.
I will get my hands on that. I'm very interested in that. Sounds wonderful. And I'll tell you something, both these books have never been recommended, which is pretty amazing, Russ, because there's a place on my website called Guest Recommended Books where there's over 3,000.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll look for that.
Yeah, there's over 3,000 books listed there with quick links to buy by my past inspiring automotive enthusiasts. So you brought 2 new books to the show. So
nice.
I appreciate that. Very good. So I am an enabler as well, and I want you to go on the ultimate drive. So here's the deal. Money's no object. I'm going to park any car in your driveway. You can take it on a drive anywhere in the world. And here's the key, because it's really about the people. You can take anybody with you, including somebody from the past is no longer with us. So that could be a pretty interesting list of potential co-pilots. So what does the ultimate drive look like for a guy like you?
There are all kinds of, again, your guests probably have talked, and I've heard some talk about, car people from the past. Yeah. But I'm going to say It would be, I've driven a lot of great cars, so I'm not lusting for any particular car because I'm fortunate enough to be able to get my hands on cars and test them out. But this would be a Cadillac, and I'll explain why. The driver would be Bob Dylan.
Oh my gosh.
And he's got a song where he's done Cadillac commercials, and on his latest studio album, he's got a song where he mentions his Cadillac. I would just love to spend some time with him. It might go miserably because he's supposed to be not exactly the most personable guy.
Maybe not.
But just yesterday, 50 years ago, I attended in the fourth row the Bob Dylan band concert, the first on the tour. This was after his motorcycle accident. He hadn't toured for years. And I was 19 years old. Wow. And I could, I had my jerky side. I had a little bottle of whiskey in my back pocket with a blue jean jacket. And Dylan didn't say anything to anybody. And I yelled out at him, you could at least say hello, you rude son of a bitch, which I kind of regret. And he just held his hands like, whoa, dude. But in Rolling Stone, which covered this tour, every city he went to subsequently, he would say, sure is great to be in Detroit. Sure is great to be in Philadelphia.
He listened to you, Russ.
Yeah, but on this drive, I would want to apologize to him for doing that because it was a jerk thing to do.
We all do things that we regret in the past. But
that's true.
It's so funny you mentioned him because this morning I was up quite early and I was listening to some of his newer songs in the background while I was doing some work. So and I found out just a week ago, I never knew this, that my son went to a Bob Dylan concert. Now my son's only 30 years old. So I went,
did he enjoy himself?
He said he did, although he said, I have no idea what he said the whole time because the way he sings is,
his voice has become really, his voice was weird all along.
Always been a challenge.
Awful.
Yeah.
But he always has a great band. He always has a great band.
Yeah. No, he said he enjoyed it.
And the other person I would want to, he's dead now very recently, but Jeff Beck, the great guitar player, Jeff Beck, who had he had so many great cars. If it was going to be a trip where we seriously talked about cars, I would want to, have Jeff pick out a car or two or three and drive me around and talk about, all his hot rodding and what he likes about the cars. That's probably actually the way I'd go. That would be my real fantasy.
One of the best guitarists ever. Yeah, very, very cool. Well, you're taking us on a fun ride today, Russ. I'm so glad that we connected and got together. I think we could talk for hours and hours about electric vehicles, the future, and a whole lot of things. But before you go, could you share some parting words of wisdom or inspiration as we enter into this new year? Yeah.
You had prompted me to have something ready, so I do.
Perfect.
And by the way, I'm happy to come on anytime. So
okay.
This is back to the Zen thing. This is a poem written by an author named Jim Harrison, and it goes like this: not here and now, but now and here. If you don't know the difference is a matter of life and death, get down naked on bare knees in the snow and study the ticking of your watch. That's it. And the idea of now and here as opposed to here and now, that actually, when I started paying attention to that, and being that was more, it makes me more present than here and now, because here is a place, but now is now. Yeah. And you have to live in the now. Of course, you have to plan for the future, but living in the now means planning for the future without getting lost in all kinds of reveries and worries and thoughts about the past and fears of the future, but really looking around, touching things, smelling things, looking at things, and living in the now. So that poem is my inspiration.
Very nice. A nice way to go into the new year and think about life. I like that. Very cool. That's another first here. So thank you for that.
You bet.
Russ, how can people learn more about you and follow you?
I've got a website with older stories at russmitchell.com, but better to go to the LA Times and just type in my name in a page with my stories of the last 10 years will pop up, and you could follow me that way. I'm also I'm not so much on Twitter anymore, but when I do go on Twitter now, it's at Russ1 Mitchell.
Okay.
On Twitter or X. Yep. And I've also migrated to Threads. I'm on that a little bit, and LinkedIn too.
All right. I'll put links to those on Russ's show notes page so you can follow along with him and reach out to him. I want to do a shout out thank you to our mutual friend Doug Stokes, who put me together with Russ today. Doug has brought so many wonderful people to the show. Doug.
He's so great.
He's a great guy. Yeah. He's a super. He's introduced me to some amazing people just like you. So Russ, thank you for spending time today, being so generous with your time, sharing your experiences. Until you and I talk again. Happy New Year, my friend.
Same to you. I enjoyed it.
I'll see you down the road.
Sounds great. Take care.
If you're listening to this program, there's a pretty good chance you believe what I believe, that the collector vehicles we love are more than just a means of getting from one place to the other. They're a part of our culture, our identity, and as a people, they bring us together at vintage races, classic car auctions, and 1,000-mile rallies. That's why I support the RPM Foundation, which exists to ensure that the critical skills necessary to preserve and restore these important vehicles aren't lost to time. RPM stands for Restoration, Preservation, and Mentorship, and their goal is to inspire the next generation of vehicle restoration professionals through its outreach programs. And they include Shop Hop, Off to the Races, the RPM Future Class, and many others. These programs engage talented young people across the country and connect them with mentors and a variety of opportunities in the industry. For more information on how the RPM Foundation is driving the future of collector vehicles skilled trade, visit rpm.foundation today.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.